When I was 18 years old, I had a job at a place called Pizza Haven. One night, I had to make the final delivery, and that delivery turned into a surprising adventure. It was getting dark, and I had to go to school the next day. Our house was a bit far from town, about 6 or 7 miles away from Pizza Haven. The area seemed isolated, with lots of trees and a spooky gravel driveway. As I drove in, I suddenly felt scared. The air was weird, and it seemed like I was in a creepy movie. The driveway went on, surrounded by trees that made it even more spooky. I sat at the end of the driveway, feeling a bit scared. It was almost 10 o'clock, and strange sounds from the trees made me uneasy. An owl hooted far away, making everything seem like a spooky movie scene. I had a task to complete, so I told myself that what I was feeling was probably just my mind playing games. I couldn't take the chance of returning to my boss without delivering the pizza. That would get me into big trouble. As I was driving towards the house, I could see it at the end of the long driveway. There was a man sitting on the front porch, smoking a cigarette under the porch light. I parked my car and walked up to the porch with the pizza, making sure to be as polite as I could. "Hi there." I rushed over as fast as I could. "How are you?" I was hoping to make a good impression, but the man looked annoyed and asked why I sat at the end of his driveway for 5 minutes. I was surprised and stumbled over my words. Then he took the pizza from my hands and said it was cold. I was confused and tried to understand how he knew I was sitting at the end of the driveway. He couldn't have seen me from the porch, so I wondered if he heard me or had cameras. I didn't want to make the customer upset, so I said I didn't know anything about sitting there. His face looked really worried, and he said he really didn't like people who lie. At that moment, I saw some movement in the house, and 2 more people appeared from the back. I got a bad feeling. Something wasn't right. Suddenly, I felt a burst of energy, like when you have to decide whether to fight or run away. I quickly gave them the food, ran to my car, and just as I opened the door, one of the guys grabbed me, hit my head on the car window, and I fell to the ground. Someone wanted my wallet and phone. They told me not to tell the police or else they'd harm me and my family. They knew where I lived because they had my ID. I didn't want to take any chances. I gave them the little cash I had, about $70. Luckily, most of my money was in the bank. When I got home, I used my girlfriend's phone to call the 24/7 hotline and canceled all my cards. I got a new ID and, thankfully, everything turned out okay. After thinking about the strange meeting, I decided to investigate. I chatted with my coworkers about what happened, and one of them shared a story about a group that tricks people using fake pizza deliveries. It appears this group goes after delivery drivers, blaming them for things like being late or delivering cold food. While distracting the driver, they quickly gather around and steal their money and belongings. I couldn't believe what happened. I got tricked by a really sneaky scam. Me and my coworkers told the police about it, but the scammers were already gone. I learned a lesson from that and started being extra careful when I delivered stuff at night. If you're doing nighttime deliveries, especially if you're young like me, be careful. Listen to your gut feelings and always stay alert. You never know when things might take an unexpected turn and make a normal delivery into a crazy experience. During the pandemic, I ended up delivering groceries to people's homes. It was a job that kept me busy, and I actually enjoyed it. As a picker, my role was to gather the items that people ordered and prepare them for delivery. And whenever there weren't enough staff, which was most of the time, I also had to deliver the goods to the customers. The job was pretty cool. I got to drive around town delivering groceries and seeing fancy houses. The best part? No annoying customer questions to deal with. That was a big win for me. Getting tips was a nice extra, and usually I'd drop off the groceries at the front door, snap a picture for proof, and head off. But once in a while, I'd actually get to meet people and assist them with their groceries. There was a lady named Vesna from Serbia who used to order groceries from me every Thursday. She was older and lived by herself after her husband passed away. Her children were living far away. When I delivered her groceries, she would stay inside and just look out her window to see me. But over time, she became more comfortable with me because I was the one delivering her groceries every week. Our usual schedule changed. I began helping her by bringing the groceries inside and putting them on her kitchen counters. She always gave me a nice tip. Over the weeks, we became friends, and Thursdays became a day I enjoyed. However, everything changed on one particular Thursday. Driving into Vesna's driveway, something felt off. Vesna usually had her blinds open so her plants could get sunlight, but today they were all closed. When I reached her front door, she wasn't there. I tried ringing the bell and knocking, but there was no response. It was strange and a bit concerning. I got really worried. Vesna, who was an old friend, didn't answer the door. I thought about what might have happened to her. I was supposed to leave the groceries outside if no one answered, but Vesna is more than just a customer. She's a friend. Even though my job rules said to leave the groceries on the porch, I couldn't help it. I decided to go inside because the door was wide open. I carried all the bags into her kitchen, which was not very bright. It was really quiet. I said her name, but she didn't answer. I put the bags on her counter and thought about calling the police. But I wasn't sure. What if she was just not home and I made the police come for no reason? As I walked back to the door, I heard some noise upstairs. I felt relieved, thinking Vesna was fine. However, my relief didn't last because she didn't respond when I called her. I sat in my car outside, trying to figure out what to do next. After 1 minute, I noticed the curtains on the second floor moving. It seemed like someone was watching me. I decided to drive around, park on the street, and look at the house. I felt confused. Was it Vesna or one of her kids? I was torn about whether to call the police or not. As I was driving past Vesna's house again, I saw a man looking out of the upstairs window. Vesna had 2 daughters, but her son had passed away a long time ago. I was curious about who the man was and why he was there when Vesna wasn't around. As time passed, the next week came, and for the first time in almost a year, Vesna didn't place any orders. I got really curious, so after work I decided to drive past her house. I noticed a police car parked in her driveway. When I got back home, I looked up her name online and discovered that she was reported missing a few days after I delivered her groceries. The date they mentioned as the last time she was likely at home was just a day after I dropped off her stuff. I told the police everything I knew, but it's been almost 3 years, and there's still no news. I often think about the guy I encountered and wonder if I narrowly escaped something bad. The mystery of Vesna's disappearance bothers me a lot, and sometimes it keeps me awake at night. Time went by, things kept changing, but there were still things I didn't understand. I kept working at the grocery store, delivering orders. However, I couldn't forget the Thursday with Vesna. Every time I delivered groceries, it reminded me of the surprising event that completely changed my life. Even though a lot of time has passed, I still remember how nice Vesna was, and the regular things we used to do together. But her sudden disappearance is like a dark cloud hanging over me. It's a mystery that hasn't been solved. I keep wondering what happened to Vesna on that Thursday, and who was that mysterious person in her house. Every Thursday, as I went about my usual activities, I couldn't help but feel like something important was not right. Instead of enjoying my job, I felt uneasy and couldn't forget about an unsolved mystery. Even delivering groceries, which I normally liked, now felt a bit sad because it reminded me of that one Thursday with the lingering mystery. 3 years passed, and I couldn't shake off the feeling of not knowing what really happened. I kept thinking about the man in Vesna's house, how he suddenly disappeared, and all the questions without answers. Even though my daily life had changed, the empty space left by Vesna's absence still bothered me. Time kept going, but we couldn't figure out what happened to Vesna. It was like a puzzle with no answer. Just doing something as ordinary as bringing groceries turned into an adventure, with surprises and things we didn't understand. It showed us that even regular moments can become strange and surprising sometimes. Before I continue to the next story, if you are interested in earning from YouTube without showing your face, or without making videos by yourself using artificial intelligence, like the video that you are watching right now, then I have a special free training for you. Check the first link in the description below to get instant access. I'm 15 years old, and last week, something crazy happened while I was delivering pizzas. I work for a popular pizza place, but I won't mention the name because they're not paying me for advertising. It's a busy job, especially near closing time. But one night, my boss called me on my day off, asking if I could come in. Since I didn't have much going on, I thought, why not? And went to work. I started my work, and right away, the phone rang. A guy wanted to order a big pizza, but when he found out I'm a girl, he started acting strange and kind of flirtatious. He told me where to deliver it. I asked a colleague to get it ready, and I saw that it's just barely in the area we usually deliver to. I even asked my boss if it's a good idea, but he was busy and didn't really listen to my worries. I decided to go along with it, entered the address, and started my journey, hoping this would be my final delivery. However, the neighborhood I found myself in looked a bit rough. The houses were old and run down, lawns were messy and overgrown, and you could hear sirens every now and then. As a small college student, it made me nervous because the crime rate in this area is really high. I drive to the place, and when I get there, I see no cars in the driveway, just a light on. It's one of those houses stuck together, like a bunch of them in a row. I take the pizza, knock on the door, since there's no doorbell, and a guy in his mid-20s opens it. He's wearing a messy tuxedo, smells like he's been drinking a lot, and looks all messy and untidy. He said his name was Nate, took the pizza, and invited me to join him. I got a bit nervous and laughed, said no, and made up a reason about not eating too much bread. But he kept asking, trying to impress me by saying he'd buy me things. I said no politely again, but then he stopped me, saying he forgot to give me a tip. He gives me a $5 bill, making sure our hands touch. Then a scream from upstairs freaks us out. Nate suddenly looks worried and tells me, "You have to leave right away." I rush to my car without looking back, feeling scared. I call my boss, almost crying, and tell him everything. He tells me to come back, saying he'll call the police. When I return, the police are already there. They ask me questions, note down where I made the delivery, and that's all. A week later, the police called me again. It turns out the guy I delivered to was the owner of the house where his parents lived. The woman yelling was his ex-girlfriend. He found out she was cheating on him. But here's the surprise, he wasn't the bad person in this story. After I left, he also called the police. His ex, the one who was screaming, had been stuck in that house for days. He caught her cheating, but he didn't hurt her. She'd been through a lot, and he wanted her to deal with what she'd done. He got arrested, but it was actually her who had a history of hurting people. She had hurt him before, and he was trying to make her realize something. She ended up in the hospital, but she lived. Isn't that surprising? The day after, I quit my job delivering things. Now I'm working at a desk. I learned something important from all of this. Always listen to your instincts when things don't seem right. Let me tell you more about that night. I delivered the pizza. At first, Nate, the person who ordered, seemed okay. He smelled like he had been drinking, but I thought maybe he'd been at a party. He kept bragging about himself and saying he could buy me expensive stuff. It made me a little worried, but it wasn't too scary at that point. When the man gave me the $5, things got strange. When he handed it to me, he looked at me oddly, like he wanted something back for the money. It made me uncomfortable. Later, I heard a really scary scream from upstairs. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before. Suddenly, the man's attitude changed, and he hurried me out. I didn't wait around to see what was going on. I just rushed back to my car as fast as I could. I was really nervous when I called my boss on my way back. I told him everything, and he said the police were coming. When I got back to the restaurant, the police were already there, waiting for me. They asked me a lot of questions, wrote down the delivery address, and then let me go. The surprise in the story was when we discovered Nate, who seemed a bit messy and smelled like alcohol, was actually the good person here. He was trying to help his ex-girlfriend who had been through a lot of tough things. He thought she needed to deal with the results of her actions, even though it was hard for her. Police took Nate, but he wasn't the one causing trouble. It was a tricky situation, and he was trying to fix things. It turns out, his ex had been violent before, and Nate was trying to help her understand that wasn't okay. She went to the hospital, but luckily, she made it through. That night made me think a lot. I decided to stop working as a delivery person because I didn't want more scary things to happen. Now, I work at a desk, far from delivering pizzas and surprises. What I learned: trust your instincts when things seem weird. You never know what might happen, especially when you're just delivering pizza.